So in this video, we're going to show you the steps you should follow from beginning to end to get a really nice voice and guitar recording, all so that you end up with clean, nicely recorded, natural sounding tracks that are going to make your life very much easier to mix on the next stage. So we're going to assume that you're recording at home and want to get your voice and your guitar recorded. For the purposes of this discussion, we'll assume you haven't got a band scenario in mind. You just want to record a nice voice and an acoustic guitar.
Perfect.
I wouldn't suggest that there's any need for you to try to capture the voice and the guitar in one take.
Sure.
There's no need to do that for the kind of recordings that we're talking about, because you're going to get no separation at all between the voice and the guitar. And what you want, most importantly, is very good separation between the voice and the guitar, because it allows you to do things with the two separate entities that you can't do if they jam together. So if you want to do a quick demo of the song so that you don't forget your song, by all means, just stick the mic in front of your chair about here and bang it out. But that's not what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how to record in a way that will get you a really good result when you finish it. When I tell people to start a song, I often recommend that they just put, if they're working to a click, which is advisable if you want to overdub things. Because if you go without the click, things can get very messy if you haven't got a reference. Now, some songs definitely don't need a click. In fact, they're not suitable to clicks. That's the kind of song that has a free-flowing tempo. And we call it, in music terms, it's called a rubato timing. Rubato means having no fixed tempo. Most pop songs, I would venture to say, are fixed. They might have a slowdown at the end, a ritardando, but they don't, once they get going, they're generally steady. So we're going to assume that's the scenario. You put your click on, and then my first recommendation would be record your song from beginning to end with the click rough as guts. Don't worry about the quality. Don't worry if you make a fluff. Don't worry how well you're singing it or playing it, but just put the song down from beginning to end. That's step one. I always do that, even in here. When someone comes in here, put that down. That's your reference. It tells you a few things. It tells you, once you've heard the whole song, have you got the whole structure down right? Number one. It gives you an immediate idea of how long the song is. If you've finished your guide demo track and you're at 5.5 minutes, that's a problem, because I think that's too long. Try to keep your songs to around 4 minutes max, because there's a time specific period where the listener, after which the listener starts to lose interest. And musically, sometimes it's too much to go past that. 3.5 to 4 is still a golden aim. So that gives you an immediate idea of the length. It also can tell you pretty much straight away whether you've got the tempo right. You don't want to wait until you've overdubbed a lot of work and put finger picking and lead fills and strumming and then find, I wish I had just dialed this back a little bit. Too late. It's WAV files, it's not MIDI. So that's the second thing. You can pick up your tempo. What's the third thing? Yes, just whether or not the song's basic structure is working too. Because when you put that demo down, often it's the first time you get the chance to hear it back. Because before that, it's just you playing it. Now you can sort of do that step back and have a little objective listen and go, you know what? After a verse, chorus, bridge, that third verse I've stuck in after the bridge doesn't work. That's the time to pop it out. Either cut it out or just re-record the track. If you've used a click track, you can just make a cut on your track and then you get it down to a usable thing.
That to me is a songwriting thing where I find it really valuable to just put my phone on with a song, record myself. It's a different experience watching back and thinking, maybe it does just drag on a little bit long. Or, and there's other times where I think I want it to be a bit longer, but having that, like you say, having that rough first version,
Yes.
you then get a chance to listen and assess if something seems off.
Yes.
Before
that's-
putting the
yes.
individual take that then...
That achieves the same purpose. Phone first or straight into your DAW, no difference. I still recommend that you do this first demo track though, even when you've started your production in your DAW, because it serves a dual purpose. I get the guy to record. So say you've recorded on your phone, yes, you're happy. Now you confidently do it, so there won't be any subsequent chopping up. Still record your guide track, which contains one mic on a mono track that's just you and your guitar, from beginning to end. It serves a couple of purposes, and the main one being that your next step would be then to record your proper guitar, if you like. Because now you've got something to actually play against. It's quite difficult for a lot of singer-songwriters to split the process of not singing and playing at the same time.
Yes.
It's a phenomenon that you've just got to respect, because your brain is somehow linked to the two together. And when you suddenly ask someone to just play the song while they sing it in their head, things can go wrong, and the roadmap might not be quite right, and then you can often make mistakes. And you go, for some reason I've sung where I shouldn't have, or whatever. So if you do this genuine performance track first, then you know the thing is right.
And that's what we typically do in here. Like, I would come in and I think just using one mic a lot of times for that first thing. I would sing and play the whole thing to the click, to the tempo that we have decided on.
Yes.
And sometimes we've changed that after that track as well, because that has, when I'm performing live, I don't have a click. It will vary quite a bit. And so sometimes that's, when we've listened to it, it's gone, that just actually drags.
And that's a difficult trade-off. Yes, a lot of the people we are talking to will find that, you know what, in some parts of my song, this damn click is now too fast. And in other places, it feels too slow. And the reason for that is because when you're performing live, you're naturally speeding up on the exciting parts, the big bits, and when it gets quieter in the verse, for example, you're pulling back. Unfortunately, you can't do it that way. You can, but it gets very tricky, and you then have to get into programming a variable tempo track, which of course is doable. Anything's doable, but at this stage of the game, for what we're trying to teach people, that's a bit advanced, and you need to wait until you've got more experience before you do that, because straight away it cancels out any chance of you to do copying and pasting, which is of huge help when you are, and we'll get to this at some stage in the future, about how you can make your home recording sound fabulously more tidy by doing careful, clever copying and pasting of sections that are the same. If you haven't got a steady tempo running underneath you, and you've done it with a variable click track, then you can't paste areas because the tempos will go out of sync. So stick to that one tempo for now. Take that guide vocal that you've recorded, which contains the demo of your voice and your guitar, and listen to that while you then play your acoustic guitar, first of the final tracks. The reason is you can now cheat. Your brain is going to actually hear yourself singing, and that synergy that happens, that we talked about when you sing and play together, a lot of that will be taken care of because you're actually subconsciously locking onto that voice. So you'll find it a lot easier to play like you're more accustomed to doing. Just remember to zip it, because any noise you make, or you might hum out suddenly, that mic's live. So, and another trick I do, if you have headphone monitoring that allows stereo monitoring, it's a huge help. If you take that guide voice and pan it hard left or hard right in your headphones.
Sure.
Because then your brain will be able to distinguish better between what was before and what you're currently doing, because they're in a different space. When they're both together in the middle, it's difficult sometimes to hear what you're doing because you're playing essentially exactly the same thing.
Right.
So that's a little psychoacoustic trick you can apply.
Yeah.
And you won't need much. I would keep the click nice and loud in the headphones, not too loud that you get spillage. That leakage is very important to avoid, because you're playing your guitar and that mic's about here. Make sure you've got headphones that are not the open back type. Have the closed pilot type.
Sure.
Even cheap ones that are closed are better than expensive ones that are more open, that give you a lovely sound. All they're going to do is crank that click track, which is usually a high-pitched sound. It travels, and then your tracks are going to have this click track audibly recorded, and the more overdubs you do, the more that click is going to become a problem. So it's very important early on to establish how loud you can get the click before it becomes an issue. And a simple way to do that is just pop the headphones on, hit record, and put the click to where it is comfortable for you, and then stop the recording and have a listen at a reasonable volume to just that silent track that you've recorded. You should hear nothing. At the most, you might hear the faintest little tock, 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 but that will be masked by the music. That's very important. And don't do this one ear off method ever, because all that does is, unless you're very careful about clamping it against your ear, most people just pop it half on their ear, and all that's doing is broadcasting the click and background music and stuff that can phase later on, because it's the same signal. You don't want anything coming out of your headphones. So monitor at a lowish level as well. It's good for your own hearing too. You've now set this up so that your guide track is on the left in your headphones. You can clearly hear it. You don't need it very loud. You've got a strong click, but you've got just enough to know where you are in the song, just to follow the voice. Then play as best you can your first guitar track. Now you can concentrate your full attention on your technique and your playing and your tightness and your timing and the clean changes. Do that. I would suggest you split your guitar parts if you combine picking and strumming in the same song, which is very common. Pick in the verse, move up to strumming in the chorus, back down to picking. Do them as separate tracks.
Right.
Because they require often different treatment to make them sit nicely in the mix. And if you've got a pick track and a strum track, you can have a lot more control over how they work together, because usually one is very much softer than the other. The picking is soft. Strumming can get quite loud, and unless you've got an engineer actually, compensating for that, you can see where the guy's switched from the verse. There's the signal, and then it goes boom.
Right.
And that's harder to mix.
Is it worth, if I'm recording at home and I have a track that starts off with picking and it goes straight into a strumming part, what are the options between chopping that and then separating them so it's all recorded as one track, and then in post-production I chop that point and edit in post
Comes
separately?
to the same thing. So that's another way of doing it.
Sure.
What I find though is what sometimes prevents me from doing that practically in here is usually the picking part's a lot more difficult.
Right.
So the guys will get a bit frustrated or maybe intimidated because that first little part of picking, say at your intro, man, they're struggling to get past that first 4 bars of intro, and so their confidence can start to go.
Sure.
So that's more about just managing the confidence, because you can imagine if you're studying, you start thinking, God, I can't even get past the first 4 bloody bars in this thing. What are people thinking? And but at home that might not be an issue.
Sure.
But yes, there's nothing to stop you actually recording your guitar in one part, picking and strumming. Generally the strumming will be easier, as you know. The picking is technically difficult to get good, clean results. So that's why you'll probably find your strumming sections no problem.
Sure.
Picking, there's some nasty sounds and there's some noisy fret transitions or some clunks and things, and there's a big difference in volume. So yep, you can chop it up at the point and then split onto another track. And then you can doctor up and re-record if necessary.
Sure.
But that might work. It all depends on how well you've played and how your timing is. Because another problem is if your timing is not precisely in time, then you'll find your chord changes are just ahead or behind the beat.
Right.
Then when you come to do a nice grid, which is on the grid at an edit point, then you get a little bit of the noise of the transition before it should be.
Sure.
So all these things have to be considered about how you approach it. But that's essentially the principle, though, is to play to that guide voice one that's got both panned. Get your track, your first guitar track done, which is usually that strum and pick one, either separately or together, up to you. Just watch the levels, though. Remember how I mentioned in one of the first videos we did, always record where you can see your USB interfaces, input stage, the gain overload meter for your guitar. Because very often, especially in a strong part of the song, strumming can get very loud. And if you've turned up the gain to get a nice level for your picking, and don't pay attention to your levels as you do more work, you will probably be distorting your strumming section.
Yes.
So that's another reason why doing it separately is a big plus, because you can then set your level for picking, which involves a different mic placement, which we can get to as well.
Yeah, sure.
Usually the same position doesn't work that great. You know, there's a nice level you get closer for picking and further back for strumming. Again, that's why I use it as two separate tracks.
Sure.
Although, to be honest, I can cheat, come to think of it, because I'm in this end. So what I normally do is, when the guy starts picking, if it is a live take and someone with your level of playing that can do it, well, I'm actually gaining up the picks.
Right.
And that 2 or 3 dBs of gain that is required gets done for you. But when you're playing at home, you can't do that. So to help you at home, you might want to do it in separate stages.
Nice.
Then just overdub all the extra bits you want. At any stage of this building up of your guitar parts, assuming it's going to be just a guitar and voice thing, and you don't want to go too much either, because it doesn't make sense to have 5 guitarists backing you. You start to lose that single voice guitar thing. There's a limit, and there's usually probably just a pick and strum track, the main one, and some fills and a lead break one, usually on the same track. Fills, although again I use a separate track for fills, which are the in-between fills between the phrases, and if there's a lead solo break, I like to have that on its own track too.
Right.
Either separate it out after you've done it, as you suggested, or as a dedicated track and go and play your solo, because the solo needs different levels and different treatments and mixing stuff that's easier to do if it's separate.
Yeah.
Do that, and then you can switch off that little guide voice that's done its job by then.
Cool.
Mute it, get it out of the way, and now you can focus on doing the vocal.
Perfect.
I would only do the vocal last, because your brain will appreciate all this lovely stuff that you've done, high quality, on time, nice playing. Spend as much time as you want to getting those guitar tracks as good as you can get them. Because that's going to raise your performance level subconsciously, because you're going to love what you're hearing.
Perfect. Yeah.
And again, pan it out. If you've got stereo headphone capability in your interface, pan things out so that you create a bit of space in the headphones for your voice.
Right.
Again, if everything's jammed in the middle of your headphones, in the middle, your brain's not going to hear as well as if all your guitar parts are separated extreme left and right. You've created some space, and then you'll just hear yourself better, so your pitch will be better and your feel will be better. Another tip. Then just record your vocals using the same principles we talked about in the first video we made, watching very carefully your levels for distortion, the popping with the pop filter, and the sibilance is something that we deal with more as we talked about afterwards, so not so much of an issue. So just mainly the popping and getting a good level. Again, looking at watching your USB level, gain, overload meter while you're singing, especially while you're singing, because if you think a guitar's got a wide dynamic range, wait till you deal with a human voice, which goes from a whisper to a roar from 1 second to the next. So be careful of that. Then you've covered basically, you'll end up with a vocal with maybe a nice harmony track, all nicely recorded, with a main guitar track and a fills and maybe a lead break track, and then you can start mixing. So that's your tracking side of it done. Hopefully all nice and cleanly recorded,
Yes.
if you follow the principles. Don't record any effects on the way in. So make sure you're not recording with any compression or anything other than trying to capture the natural sound that comes out of your guitar. That's all you want to do. Capture it as balanced and natural sounding as you can, even if it's a little boomy or dull.
Sure.
Capture it cleanly, and you can deal with that when you mix it down. Same with your voice. Just get it down naturally and cleanly, and then you can do a great deal when you start mixing it.